Put chicken on a plate and nobody hesitates. Put a rooster beside that same plate and suddenly chicken feels like the wrong word. That reaction hides a real biological twist. Male chickens are perfectly edible. In fact, some of the chicken you've eaten may already have come from males. But in egg-producing flocks, about half the chicks hatch male, and they can't lay the one product those birds were bred to produce. So why not just raise those males for meat? That's where the obvious answer starts to fall apart, because male chicken isn't really one kind of production animal. Humans bred different chicken populations for different jobs, and one type of male ended up stuck somewhere in between.
Start with the part the thumbnail makes strangely easy to miss. A rooster is not biologically disqualified for dinner. Male chickens can be eaten. Males from meat-oriented broiler populations are raised for meat. So if the first explanation that popped into your head was maybe males just make bad chicken, that answer falls apart almost immediately. Sex alone does not explain the empty plate. The hidden category is the bird's production role. Modern poultry systems contain chicken populations that humans have pushed toward very different outputs. Broilers are mainly selected for meat production. Layers are mainly selected for egg production. Over generations, that selection has created measurable differences in growth rate, feed efficiency, muscle development, metabolism, and fat deposition between those populations. But the grocery store hides almost all of that. A package just says chicken. It doesn't say descended from a population humans repeatedly selected for rapid growth. An egg carton doesn't say product of a different population selected for reproductive output. That would be a terrible label. But once you remove that history, the animals start to feel more separate than they really are. You see eggs in one aisle, chicken meat somewhere else. A hen in a picture of an egg farm, a rooster in a barnyard. And without really noticing it, your brain starts sorting them into what feel like natural categories. Egg bird, meat bird, rooster, food. But those categories didn't arrive neatly packaged by biology. Male is a sex. Broiler and layer are production categories. And this is where the obvious follow-up becomes the right question. Fine, if a male chick from an egg-producing line can't lay eggs, then just raise him for meat. Why wouldn't you? If that was your first reaction too, right, raise him. Keep that answer in your head, because the next part is where an ordinary chicken starts revealing just how strange human optimization can become. Put an egg carton and a package of chicken breasts in the same grocery cart. They barely feel connected. One becomes breakfast, the other becomes dinner. But both products exist because humans spent generations asking versions of the same question. Which birds give us more of what we want? That's where domestication stops being a simple story about humans taming a wild animal. Selection can keep going long after an animal is domesticated. Once humans influence which birds reproduce more often, human preference becomes part of the pressure shaping the population. More eggs, faster growth, better feed efficiency, more useful body composition, different reproductive traits, then repeat and repeat again. That process is artificial selection. Domestic chickens trace primarily back to red jungle fowl ancestry, but the birds in a modern layer house and the birds in a modern broiler system are not just copies of that ancestral animal with different labels slapped on them. Genomic studies show strong signs of human-directed selection throughout chicken domestication and later specialization, including the development of distinct broiler and layer populations. The timing matters too. Chicken domestication is ancient, but the extreme commercial separation between specialized broiler and layer lines is much more recent, becoming especially pronounced during the 20th century as poultry breeding increasingly treated egg production and rapid meat growth as separate goals. So imagine one chicken population with two enormous sliders floating beside it. One says eggs, the other says growth. At first, neither slider is pushed very far. Now start choosing generation after generation. On one side, birds that perform better at laying contribute more to the next generation. On the other, birds that grow faster, use feed differently, and develop the body traits humans want for meat contribute more. Move the sliders again, then again. Small differences start adding up. Eventually, the descendants are still chickens, but the jobs humans wanted have started showing up in the birds. Breed for the same job long enough, and the job starts getting built into the bird. That is the ancient human rule hiding underneath a very modern supermarket. Humans did not simply find one chicken that was for eggs and another that was for meat. We kept choosing, and the animals changed around those choices. Now, the first thumbnail becomes uncomfortable in a completely different way. A male from a meat-oriented line can fit the meat side of the system, But put a male chick inside a highly specialized laying line. He cannot produce the thing that makes that line economically valuable. No eggs. So move him to the other side, meat. Except now he's being compared with a broiler population that humans spent generations selecting specifically for rapid growth and meat production. He's edible, but edible and efficient aren't the same thing. Poultry research shows that males from layer lines grow and use feed differently from specialized broilers, which is exactly why just raising for meat becomes much more simple once you bring in millions of birds, feed costs, time, and production efficiency into the picture. And that's the part humans accidentally created. One chicken population became extremely useful for eggs. Another became extremely useful for meat. Then a perfectly normal male was born on the side of the system where his sex prevents him from producing the main product, while his breeding history makes him a poor fit for the other highly optimized job. Nothing is biologically wrong with him. The jobs simply moved farther apart. And once that happened, the question stopped being, why don't humans eat roosters? It became something much harder. What does a highly optimized food system do with the animal that ends up between the jobs? Now put the male chick from the laying line between the two jobs humans created. On one side, eggs. On the other, meat. He cannot produce eggs because he is male, so the obvious answer still sounds easy. Raise them for meat. But the meat side of the system has already been optimized around a different kind of chicken. Specialized broilers were selected for rapid growth and efficient meat production. Male chicks from laying lines generally grow more slowly and differ in feed efficiency, muscle development, and body composition. That difference may sound small until a hatchery is producing enormous numbers of birds. Then every extra day of feed, housing, labor, and space gets multiplied again and again. This is the part the supermarket never shows. The chick is healthy, he is edible. Nothing about being male makes him biologically defective. He simply fits poorly into two jobs humans have made extremely narrow. The animal did not become useless, the system became more specific about what counted as useful, and that distinction has real consequences. In specialized egg production, this mismatch historically contributed to the culling of male layer chicks shortly after hatching. Not because their meat is poisonous, not because nature somehow rejected them. The economic problem is that they cannot become laying hens while the meat industry already has broiler populations that do the meat job much more efficiently. That uncomfortable outcome is also why people have been looking for alternatives. One is to raise layer males anyway. Another is to use dual-purpose chickens, birds selected to make both egg and meat production more practical instead of pushing each population so far toward one extreme. And another is in-ovo sexing, identifying sex before hatch using optical, imaging, or related techniques, so the production decision can happen earlier in development. The important thing is what all of those alternatives quietly reveal. The rule is adjustable. It was never written into the species. Roosters and other male chickens have been eaten in many human food systems. Less specialized farming can use males differently. A bird that makes little economic sense inside one industrial model can make perfectly ordinary sense somewhere else. So now go back to the thumbnail. Why her, not him? At first, it looks like a male versus female question, but that is only the visible layer. A female layer fits the egg job. A male broiler can fit the meat job. A male layer lands in the awkward middle, not because male chicken is the wrong animal for the plate, but because breeding history matters. Same species, different line, different job, different economic outcome. And scale makes that distinction brutal. When one bird grows only a little more slowly, that may barely matter in a backyard flock. Multiply that difference across thousands or millions of birds, and suddenly feed, time, housing, labor, and market weight become a completely different calculation. That's why edible and economical to raise are not the same thing. And once you see that, the supermarket starts to look stranger. Eggs sit in one aisle, chicken meat sits in another. The hen belongs with breakfast. The broiler belongs with dinner. The rooster feels like the odd one out. But nature did not put those labels there. Humans did, through selective breeding, through specialization, through scale, through repeated decisions about which traits were worth reproducing. Eventually, those choices became so familiar that the final categories started to feel biological.
That may be the most revealing part of domestication. Humans don't just give animals jobs, we can keep selecting around those jobs until the animal itself starts to look as if it was always meant for them. The laying hen looks made for eggs, the broiler looks made for meat, and the male layer chick can start to look like the mistake. But the middle only looks wrong because humans push the endpoints so far apart. So why does the rooster seem like the wrong chicken for the plate? Not because male chickens are naturally outside the category of food. Humans took one species, pushed different populations toward different purposes, and then built a food system around the differences we created. Male is not the same as inedible. Species is not the same as production line. Biological value is not the same as economic value. And a natural difference between male and female is not the same thing as the human role built around that difference. The next time eggs and chicken meat end up in the same grocery cart, notice how unrelated they feel. Then erase the labels for a second. Hen, rooster, layer, broiler, eggs, meat. The birds are still there. The categories were ours. If that makes another obvious animal rule feel suspicious, write the animal question wildly human should pull apart next.